Okay, so we'll start just going back on the last part that we learned yesterday. So it's referring to the question if you're allowed to eat the esrog after Yom Tov, and if you're allowed to, or during Yom Tov, or if you're allowed to use the sukkah once you finished with it, still that it's Yom Tov. So there was an argument if the mitzvah is done for when the mitzvah is finished, and then it's already not holy, you could eat it. I mean, it's holy, but you could eat it. Or the question is, can you, when you designate the mitzvah, not the muktzah of Shabbos, but the muktzah of mitzvah, do you designate it for an entire day? So that's what we were last discussing. And the question is, what happens on the eighth day that's a suffix that we have a doubt if it's the seventh day? What are we allowed to do with it or not? So the Gemara starts like this. Amar Rav Yehuda Breder Shmuel Bar Shilas Mishmei the Rav. He says in the name of Rav that this is how you work. Shmini suffix shvi, if you have the eighth day, which is a suffix, which if it's shvi or not. So the way you behave shvi l'sukkah. You behave with regards to the sukkah, you behave like shvi, that means you sit in the sukkah. However, shmini, you behave as if it's the eighth day, the bracha, which means you don't say the bracha. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Yochanan, so it seems like Rabbi Yochanan is arguing with Rav. He says, shmini lazeh lazeh. You don't sit in the sukkah and you don't say bracha. Mesav. So now the Gemara says, what are they arguing about? Rav Yehuda Ber Shmuel Bashir Mishmei the Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. It says, Mesav Kula Ame Loi Plagin in the Yasvina. With regards to sitting in the sukkah on the eighth day. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me introduce where we are at. We're Daf Mem Vav, Amud Beis, 46b. We started 4 lines from the bottom. So the Gemara says, Mesav, if with regards to sitting down, nobody argues. Nobody argues that you sit in the sukkah on the eighth day. That there's a doubt that's the seventh. Kipligi, when returning the page now, 47a, Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. Kipligi livruche. The only argument is with regards to the bracha. According to the opinion that it's a shvi l'sukkah, which is a view in the name of a view of their small bar shelas, in the name of Rav, he says you do say it. The Rabbi Yochanan says that it's shmini lazeh lazeh. You don't say the bracha, but everybody agrees that you do. Amar Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says, "Nakoit the Rabbi Yochanan v'yadcha." Follow the ruling of Rabbi Yochanan firmly in your hand. Why? The Rav Huna Bar Bizna, it's very interesting the language that's used. Rav Huna Bar Bizna and all the great men, all the greats of the generation, the Gdolim, Iklu b'sukkah v'shmini safek shvi, they came to the sukkah on the eighth day. That was a doubt of the seventh day. Yasvei, they did sit in the sukkah on the eighth day. However, bruche lo riche, they did not say the bracha. So here we have proof that it's like Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says, Dilma, maybe that's not a proof. Why? Sir Lahu, Kivan da Omar, they're in the opinion of like the one who says, since they someone who blessed they should be sukkah. On the first day of Yom Tov, he doesn't have to bless because they consider that all the 7 days is Yom HaRichta. It's one long day, and therefore you don't have to bless it again. So the Gemara says, no, that's not That's not a possibility that they held that opinion. Why? Gemire the me'afar aso. There was a tradition that the Kabbalah was received with regards to this statement of Rabbi Yosef and the story of Rav Huna bar Bizna of Gdei Adar, that they came from the Me'afar also. Afar also, they came from the, here it translates the meadow. They could have come from the farm area, from the out in the fields, and therefore, out in the fields, they did not have a sukkah. So they did not sit in a sukkah for 7 days, and this is the first time they sat in the sukkah, and therefore, the opinion that says that if you say a bracha the first day, it's paiter, you do not have to say the rest of the days. That cannot be, because they did not sit in the sukkah even one time. And that below in the footnotes that asks the question, how could it be that we take these people, Rav Huna bar Bizna, and all the greats of the generation, and for 7 days they didn't keep the mitzvah sukkahs? How is it possible that they didn't keep the mitzvah sukkahs? So they give certain explanation. One explanation says that they had to watch their sheep or their fruits, and as a result, they didn't have in the fields and the fruits a place to have a sukkah. That's very weak. I mean, you call them Gdei Adar. How would a Gadol Adar not organize for himself a sukkah in such a situation? And another explanation is that they actually were persecuted, and they were actually running for their lives from one area. It was known that in Bavel there were certain areas like the yeshivas was destroyed and a new yeshiva was opened because of the wars and persecution. In any case, we see that they followed Rabbi Yochanan. Ikadame, there are those who say, everybody agrees that you don't say the bracha on the 8th day. That's a doubt of a 7th. Kipligi the meista. They argue if you should sit in the sukkah on that 8th day. According to the one who says that it's Shiva Sukkah, which is in the name of Rav, Bashmol Bashil is the name of Rav. So you sit in the sukkah on the 8th day. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that it's like the 8th day, you also don't sit in it. So everybody agrees that you don't say the bracha. The argument is only to sit in it. So it's completely the opposite than what we explained before. Amar B'Yosef. Follow firmly the way of Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Amar Deshmaita Mani. Who's the one who has the greatest knowledge and mastery in the name of Rav, and who reported in the name of Rav that you should dwell in the sukkah on that day? It's Rav Yehuda Breder Shmuel Bashelas. However, we know that Vishmini Suffolk, he himself, Rav Yehuda Breder Shmuel Bashelas, he himself, so Vishmini Suffolk Shri, but he himself on the 8th day, that was a doubt of the 7th, he sat outside the sukkah. So that proves that even though he may have said the ruling of Rav, he himself applied the ruling of Rabbi Yochanan that you don't sit in the sukkah on the 8th day. Very good. The Hilchas Mesa Yasvin and Bruchelam Bruchinim. What's halacha? The Gemara says halacha is that you sit in the sukkah but you don't say the bracha. Yeah, we say the halacha like Rabbi Yochanan. Yeah. The third verse Yisrael was sharper. Always to say. Kimi tzien tiftisak. Always sharp. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, we're in the middle of the page of Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. Amar V'Yechanam Omer Zman B'Shmini Shechag. We say Shechianu on the 8th day of Yom Tov, Shmini Atzeres. Ve'en Omer Zman B'Shvi Pesach. However, on Shvi Pesach we don't say Zman. So now there's going to be a whole Shaklavitaria. What's the difference and why Shmini Atzeres gets the Zman, the bracha of Shechianu, and we don't say it every day of the 7th day? So there's going to be a whole Shaklavitaria. Omar Levi Barchama, V'Ismer Recham Rechanina. Levi Barchama said it, and there are those who say that it was Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina. So some say it was his grandfather, I would assume. Hey, though, you should know that Shmini Atzeres Sharei Choluk B'Shlosh Dvarim. Shmini Atzeres has a separation of 3 things, and therefore there's a new Shechianu said recited on it. What are the 3 things? The Sukkah, Velulav, and Nisuch HaMayim. There are 3 things that, in regards to the Sukkah, we don't dwell in the Sukkah, Velulav, and we don't shake lulav, and we do Nisuch HaMayim on the 8th day and not the rest of the days. So because it has these 3 differences, it's considered a new Yom Tov. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Nisuch HaMayim, which means the pouring of the water on top of the Mizbeach, was done every day of the days of Sukkot, and it was done in a measurement of a lug. According to Rav Levi Bar Chama or Rav Chama Chanina, it was done only on Shmini Atzeres, and it was done with 3 lug. So there's a difference. Okay, he says, okay. So according to Rav Yehuda, it was equal in Nisuch HaMayim and the pouring of the water on top of the Mizbeach. However, there's a difference of 2, and because of this difference of 2, it's considered a new Yom Tov, and therefore you say Shechianu. The Gemara asks, if that's the case, then apply the same logic to Shvisha Pesach and say Shechianu there. Why? It's a separation between the first night that you're chayav to eat matzah midaraisa to the rest of the days that you're not. And therefore, because there's such a separation, you should say Shechianu on the 7th day of Pesach. The Gemara answers, continues the question, explains it. The first night, it's a compulsory, it's a chayva, it's mandatory, and from then on, it's reshus. It's the Rabbana. So the Gemara answers, Achiyashta, Hasa milayla chaluk miyayim in a chaluk. Acha afilu miyayim na chaluk. What does he say? He says, in regards to the 7th day of Pesach, the difference is already the first night. The first day of Pesach already is not chayav midoraisa. So the first night is chayav, and the first day itself is not chayav, and then it goes on for 7 days. So that's not considered a separation because it's already been separated from the first night of Pesach. Here, here for the full 7 days, you have the mitzvah of lulav, the mitzvah of sukkah. So therefore, there is a difference from the day, not 7 days before, but from the day right before. So therefore, that's considered. Ravina expands on that. He says that the separation here is the night before, the day before, and this one is 7 days before. So why wait 7 days to make a bracha? In theory, if you would say that there's a separation on matzah, you would say it already all 7 days of Chol Hamoed, every day has a separation. Another explanation, Amar of Papa, so the way it worked was in the first day of Sukkot, you bring 13 13 parim, you bring 13 cows, right? And or actually bulls, yeah, parim, bulls. And on Shmini Atzeres, it doesn't say the plural word of parim. It says par. You only bring one. So it goes down from 13, and on the last day of the seventh day of Sukkot, you bring 7. But then after 7, it goes down to 1. So obviously, there's no connection between the 7 and 1 as it digressed, as it got reduced on the 7 days of Sukkot. It got reduced from 13 to 7, and then it jumps from 7 to 1, and obviously it means that it's a new Yom Tov. It has no connection. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, Hag Ksiv Bayoim, and Hasam Ksiv Uvayim. So by the days of Sukkot, it says Uvayim, Sheni Vayim. Uvayim is the Vav HaMechaber, is the Vav that connects to the day before. Here it says Bayoim, it signifies that it's a day that stands on its own, which has no connections to the previous day. Therefore, there's a difference between the 8th day. Rashi Amar, Rashi says, Ha'aksiv kamishpat, and Hasam Ksiv kamishpatam. Here it says, in the 8th day it says kamishpat, and over there it says kamishpatam. Mishpatam is the plural, their law, that means it's a continuation, and here it's a new law, completely brand new. So all this is proof that the 8th day is a separate Yom Tov. Let's see if we could assist and bring a brisa that supports all this. It says, "Aparim, ha'elim, v'akvasim, ma'akvin zetze." What does that mean? That if you have a day that for example, on the first day it was 13, second day maybe it was 12, and instead of 12, they brought 7. They're missing some bulls. So could you go ahead and continue doing the rest of the avodah and bring the musaf if you're missing some bulls? So according to the brisa, the Tanakama says, yes, you cannot continue until you have the perfect number. However, Rabbi Yehuda says, we don't stop the service of musaf because we didn't bring enough bulls, because they anyhow every day get reduced. So that signifies that their number is not like mandatory, because they are reduced every day. So since the whole Yom Tov we see it's reduced, so if we missed a couple, it's not the end of the world. You continue with the service of musaf. Amrullah, everybody says to Rabbi Yehuda, so if they all get reduced in a specific manner, so you can't say that they're not dependent on one another, and especially on the 8th day it goes down to 1, and that's not only in the Parliament Ailing, it also gets reduced in it also gets reduced on the rams and the sheep, not just on the bulls, because on the rams and the sheep you only bring 1 on the 8th day, and before that it was I believe it was two rams. See what it says here. Definitely the number gets reduced on the 8th. Amar Lahem, you can't bring me proof of what happens on the 8th day, because Shmini Rega B'Fnei Atzmahu, and therefore you can't bring me proof that on the 8th day it drops. And he says like this: Shekshem sheshiv simechag tu'unin korban v'shir vracha v'lina. Av shmini tam korban v'shir vracha v'lina. So very interesting. So he says like this: just like the 7 days are required a korban, but they're separate than the 8th day and the shir. So the footnote says very interesting about the shir, about the song that the Levim would sing. So all the songs that the Levim would sing in the Beis Hamikdash has to do. Rashi also says this. They're all referring to Mas Noisanim, the giving of charity to the poor people, because on the Yontiv you're supposed to make sure that everybody gets Simchas Yontiv, also the poor. So we want to make sure that when you're joyous, that your heart also has joy and generosity to the poor. So all the songs that the Levim sang on the Yontiv of Sukkot was referencing and giving motive and incentive to the listeners to become more generous and charitable to the poor. So it was a specific shir, it was a specific song from the Tehillim to inspire people to give tzedakah. Then there was a bracha. So we're going to see in the Gemara what the bracha is. And then there was lina. So what's lina? Since it says in the korban, it says, and when you have a korban, it says that the next morning you get up and you go back to your tent. From the fact that the Torah says that the next morning you get up and you go to your tent, it means you have to stay there overnight. Because the Torah says specifically that there is such a thing as that you're still in Yerushalayim in the next morning before you went back to your tent. So all the days of the Chag, when you bring the korban, you have to stay overnight. And why do you have to stay overnight for all 7 days, or existing in the 7 days? Because in the Chag, the only simcha, it says simcha b'Chag is basar v'yayin. The simcha, the simchas yontiv, the happiness of yontiv, is on flesh, on meat and wine. And in order to eat meat, you had to bring a korban shlamim. So now, when a person eats on yontiv the meat, he had to bring a korban shlamim. So that means that he had to at least stay one night in Yerushalayim. Because after you bring a korban, you have to stay one night in Yerushalayim. And he says the Shmini is also has those 4 qualifications. You bring korban, the shir. However, in the 8th day, it was not referring to the charity. On the song of the Levine was not trying to inspire charity. It was a specific song. It's Lamatecha Shminis. It was a specific song for the 8th day. So now the Gemara is going to ask, my love, what is bracha? It says korban v'shir bracha. My love, zman. So here we see proof that you say shechiyanu on the 8th day. So the Gemara answers no. It's not referring to zman the bracha. It's referring to birchas hamazon and tefillah. In birchas hamazon you say liyom shekul toiv. So you add the extra, and in davening you say b'yom shmini atzeres hachag hazeh. So that's what it means, bracha. It does not mean shechiyanu. So the Gemara says, Hachinami mistava. That must be the explanation of what the bracha means. If you would think that you're referring to shechiyanu, zman kol shiva meika. Do we say shechiyanu on every day of Chol HaMoed, of the 7 days of Sukkot? No, we don't. For sure we don't. So therefore, when it says the word bracha, it's referring to the bracha and birkas hamazon and davening, that we give it its own name. So we're in Daf Mem Zayin with base 47b. Turn the page. The Gemara says no. That can't be an answer. Why? Halakasha. So what happens if somebody forgets to say Shechiyanu the first day? there's a potential for him to say it on the second day. And if he forgot to say Shechianu on the first day and the second day and the third day, he'll say it on the fourth day. So that's not proof that you don't say that maybe it is Shechianu that you say on the eighth day. The Gemara continues and says, this really means it's not Shechianu, it's remaining to the designation of the day and Birkas Hamazon and davening. And note, by the way, how it says Birkas Hamazon before davening. And the reason it says Birkas Hamazon before davening is Birkas Hamazon is midarais. It's more lachata v'salata v'rachta. This is mikol makayim kois beinen. We require when you say shechianu, you need to have a cup of wine. In those days, I guess, or I don't know. Today we don't. We also say shechianu on a cup of wine. We say shechianu other times, but you definitely, when you say shechianu, you need a cup of wine. Maybe this statement that shechianu is said on a cup of wine helps Rav Nachman. Why? The Amar of Nachman Zman Omer Afilu B'Shruk. You could say shechianu even when you're in a marketplace. So Gemara right away says, if you say that you need a cup of shechianu, what the person is in the marketplace, suddenly he finds a cup of wine, and you could say shechianu. It's not possible. The Gemara says, yeah, it is possible. Maybe he passed by a friend or store, and there was a cup of wine. So yeah, it's possible to say shechianu even in the marketplace every day. Rabbi Yehuda Shmini Talmina, and Rabbi Yehuda was the opinion that even on the eighth day you have the mitzvah to stay overnight in Yerushalayim. So Gemara right away says, "V'hatanya we learned in the Brayso Rabbi Yehuda Omer minayin lePesach sheni she'ena Talmina." How do we know that on the second day? Just to remind you, after you bring a korban, you're supposed to stay one night in Yerushalayim. You can't bring a korban and right away leave. It's like you come to a king to bring him a gift, you give him a gift and you leave right away. You have to at least show your respect to the king and stay in his capital for a night, and then you go back to your city. Rabbi Yehuda says, so on Pesach Sheni, you do bring the korban Pesach, but here, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he says you don't have to stay overnight. Why? Where do we learn this whole thing that you have to stay overnight in Yerushalayim? Because it says in the pasuk that you should get up in the morning and actually the little translation was turn in the morning, and you go back to your tents, you go back home. Well, what does it say before that? In 6 days you should eat matzahs. Only on the days where you're required to eat matzahs, 6 days, are you required to stay overnight in Yerushalayim? Pesach Sheni is not required that you eat matzah 6 days. And in Talon Lina, you don't have to stay overnight. So what is this review the rule coming to teach us, to exclude? My love, it also excludes the 8th day chag that you don't have to sleep. So it seems like there's a question here on Rabbi Yehuda against Rabbi Yehuda. One place he says that you don't have to sleep. Another place it would seem that it's coming to exclude and tell us that you do have to sleep. The Gemara says no. He came only to exclude Pesach Sheni, which is similar to the first Pesach, but he didn't come to explain on the 8th day. Therefore, it's not an issue. This is also a reasonable explanation to explain of Rav Yehuda what that where do we see this? We see this idea that there's a difference between the 8th and the seventh or the eighth, and these types of things. Which are the things? Now we learn in the Mishnah, abikurim. When you bring the bikurim, it's to unin korban v'shir utnufa velina. Again, you bring a korban. There's the song of the Levim. There's tnufa. Tnufa is the weaving, the lifting, velina, and overnight in Yerushalayim. He says, "Man shamas leida amar tnufa." Who is the Tana says that you need to? One of the things that you have to do for bikurim is tnufa, waving the basket of fruit. So it says that obviously is Rabbi Yehuda. The Ka'amar Ta'um Lina. And we saw over here that it says that you have to stay overnight. Even though Bikurim doesn't have 6 days of eating matzah or observing Bikurim 6 days. What did he say before? The only time that you have to stay overnight is similar to matzah. What does that mean? In matzah, you have to, in Pesach, you have to eat 6 days matzah. So therefore, you will have to stay overnight. But Pesach Sheni doesn't have 6 days of matzah, so you don't have to stay overnight. Bikurim, you don't have 6 days of some sort of bikurim, continuation of the bringing of the bikurim. And what does he say? That you have to have lina, the kamar tone lina. So how do we know? So now the Gemara just moves aside a little bit and says, how do we know that this mission, that this is Rabbi Yehuda? Who's the one? The Gemara asks, "Man shamas le'damar tnufa." Who's the one that you heard that says that you need to have the weaving of the bikurim? So they said it's Rabbi Yehuda. So how do we know that? Tanya, we learned in the Brayta. You should place the basket in front of Hashem. The Yehuda says this v'hinachtai, this place in the basket in front of Hashem is a weaving. Even though v'hinachta means you should place, but the Yehuda learns a special limud. Placing means weaving, lifting, raising. So the Gemara says, are you saying that this is weaving or it's just putting down? So the Gemara says there's 2 times the terminology of hanacha in the mitzvah bikurim. There's a term that says ve'inichai, and then it says ve'hinachtai. It's 2. So the if you want, we could read the notes, the footnotes, how the bikurim works. And we'll read footnote 16 just so we understand a little bit how the bikurim. He writes it very nicely. I hope we have a little bit of time. I'll read it. He says the Torah had instructed the farmer to take the first fruits into his field and put them in the basket and ascend to the Beis Hamikdash. There, he used to declare to the Kohen his gratitude of having been privileged to live in Eretz Yisrael. The Torah says, the Kohen shall take the basket from your hand and place it before the Mizbeach of Hashem, your God. At this point, the Torah sets forth a lengthy paragraph which the farmer must recite, whereby he recalls our nation's former enslaved state, and in contrast it with the now blessed situation in the land flowing with milk and honey. The farmer concludes, Vata, hinei vesis reshis pri adama, asher nasata li Hashem, v'inachtoi lifnei Hashem elokecha, v'ishtachavisa lifnei Hashem elokecha. And now behold, I have brought the first fruit of the ground that you have given me, Hashem, and you shall place it before Hashem, and you shall prostrate yourself and bow down before Hashem. So what does the Torah say? The Torah states that the Kohen takes the basket from the owner's hand, and first he places it in the Mizbeach. Then, after instructing the farmer to recite the declaration of thanks, the Torah tells the farmer to lay the basket before Hashem. But the Kohen already set it down in the Mizbeach. So how could it be that the Torah says twice, V'hinachtai? So first it says that the Kohen took the basket and he puts it in front of the Mizbeach. Then you say the giving thanks. And then the Torah says, V'hinachtai, that you set it down in front of Hashem. It's already been set down by the Kohen. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says that comes to teach us that this second V'hinachtai is not that you should set it down, but you should weave it. You should do a tnufa. So again, I'll read it very quickly. The Tanya V'hinachtai is tnufa. How do we know? Do you say it's weaving or it's just putting it down? So the Gemara, the Brisa says, the first Veinichai, the Kohen puts it in front of the Mizbeach. There's a second one that says you should rest it. It's already there. The basket is there in front of the Mizbeach. So that means Zoit Nufa. So that's where Rabbi Yehuda learns. I'm sure there is. I don't have that on top of my head. Definitely something to look into what the tnufa is. I'm sure there's some sort of connection. You know, when you pick up the kiddush, you lift it up, and it has to be taken off the ground. You know, separation. But I'm sure there's something very specific to it. Yeah, it's a great question. Anybody has any idea? Maybe Daniel or what the tnufa is. Professor is asking what's the significance of tnufa, weaving, if there's any significance. I'm sure there is. So the Gemara says, so we said that this Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, where it says that you have to do tnufa and lina and korban and shir. We right away we tagged Rabbi Yehuda as the Tana of that Mishnah. Did we say it was a Mishnah or a surprise? Yeah, it's a Mishnah. However, the Gemara says with Dilma, maybe it's not Rabbi Yehuda, it's Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. The Tanya, you take the basket, the Kohen takes the basket from your hand. The Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. We have a very specific Mishnah that says that Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says you're required to have tnufa. So the Gemara says, let's see. What is the weaving that Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says? My timer, Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. Where does he learn that you need to do this weaving? Ostia yad mishlamim. He learns that there's the same word yad you take from your hand from the korban shlamim. It says by bikurim that the kohen takes the basket from your hand. His hands bring. His own hands should bring the fire and offering of Hashem. Makan kohen. So what? When you bring a shlamim, does the Yisrael who brings a shlamim bring the fire to Hashem? It's the kohen who brings the fire in the korban. Makan kohen, just like in shlamim, when it says yodav means his hands, it's referring to the kohen. Aflahalan kohen. Also by v'lokach atene miyadecha is when it's through the kohen. Ma'alahalan ba'alin, just like in shlamim. The owner must be the one that brings the korban. Afkan ba'alin. Okay, so how do you have this both? Make up your mind. Is it a kohen or is it the one who brings the korban, the Yisrael? It says haketzad. Koyen maniach yad tachas yad ba'alim u'meinif. So this is the way it works is a kohen puts his hand under the hand of the owner, and they I guess the kohen is behind him or in front of him. I'm not sure how the nufa is. I didn't specifically do that. So here in the footnotes he says the owner holds onto the upper rim of the basket while the kohen places his hand beneath its base. So the owner is on this side and the kohen is all the way on the bottom. Very good. My havele. So what do we? The Gemara finally says, "No, okay, tachlis. We had such a long shakla v'tarya. What's the bottom line? What do we say shechianu? We don't say shechianu. Make up your mind." So it says, "Rav Nachman Amar zman b'shmini shechag." Rav Nachman says you do say shechianu on the eighth day. Rav Sheshes Amar einar mizman b'shmini shechag. Rav Sheshes say you don't say it. The Hilchasa Eimri Zman B'Shmini Shachar in the halacha according to the Gemara that you do say Shechianu on the eighth day. Hanika we say Rav Nachman. We see a brisa that follows Rav Nachman. It says Shmini. We just turned the page to 48a of Ches Amud Aleph. Tanya Rav Nachman le'inyan regel b'fnei atzmai with regards that the eighth day is a yontav by itself, and therefore you say shechianu. And it's with regards to 6 things, and there is a siman to those with these words. It's called pazer kashev. Pazer means to spread, kashev means to listen, but I guess that's not what the pay zayin reish kufshin leis. So pay is payas b'fnei atzmai. You have an independent lottery because all the other days, the mishmar was the one who received the korban to shecht, etc., etc. But on Shmini Atzeres, it didn't go by the mishmar; it went purely by a lottery. Zman b'fnei atzmai, you say shechianu on the eighth day. It's a regel b'fnei atzmai. It's a independent Yantiv, because what we say during the independent Yantiv, we say the brachas with the yoim, and we bring a korban. You could bring a korban shlamim for that specific day. Korban mifnei atzmai that it has different. It doesn't go according to say the 13th to the 7th of the 7 days. You only bring one bowl, so it has a separate number. It's totally not related to the previous days of Karbanis. Shir b'fnei atzmai, like we explained before, that the songs of the Tehillim of the 7 days had to do with giving charity, and on the 8th day it didn't. It's called Lamasecha Shmini, so it had no connection to the charity, the inspiration of charity. And Bracha b'fnei atzmai, the blessing by itself has to do with what we say in, I believe, in Birkas Hamazon and in the Tefillah that you say by Yom Shmini Atzeres Chagas.
So this is Rob Nachman's essentially his definition of what constitutes a raga. If you have these 6.
I don't know if he says it constitutes a regel, but he says definitely on Shmini Atzeres you have all these 6 separations that will definitely, on this case, constitute a regel. It could be what you're saying is correct. I don't know, but he's saying that if you want to remember the reasoning why Shmini Atzeres is considered an independent regel, use the word pazer kashev.
For example, this would explain why Shmini Shalpesa isn't considered a raga because we don't have a unique carbon on Shmini Shalpesa.
Correct. So he's saying, yeah, we said a couple of things on Shmini Shalpesa. We're trying to say that it's separate, but apparently we don't have that separation that you have on Shmini Atzeres, which is significant. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna stop over here. Shakayach.
Well done, thank you.
I don't know, we miss Rabbi Smith. This is getting, I hope he has a refuah shalema. He said he was feeling better, but not, he asked me again, so just, send him a refuah shalema and, definitely miss him. I miss him myself. No comparison.
All true.
Correct. Tezkere Misvot, Usul Tovot, and the Yom
Have a
Tov.
beautiful, miraculous day. Bye-bye.
You too. Shukar.